The wind howled against the windows of my tiny apartment, like a living thing trying to claw its way inside. Rain hammered the glass in sheets so thick I could barely see the streetlights 3 floors below. I pulled my threadbare cardigan tighter around my shoulders, watching the storm rage as I nursed my 3rd cup of instant coffee. The cheap ceramic mug was chipped at the rim, but it was warm against my perpetually cold hands. My feet ached. They always ached after a double shift at Roselli's, the Italian restaurant where I'd worked for the past 2 years. The scent of garlic and tomato sauce still clung to my uniform, mixing with the dampness that seemed to permeate everything in my apartment. The radiator hissed and clanked in the corner, offering barely enough heat to take the edge off the November chill. I was exhausted down to my bones. That deep weariness that comes from working 14-hour days, 6 days a week, and still barely making rent. The eviction notice I'd received last month sat on my kitchen counter, a constant reminder that even my best efforts weren't quite enough. I had until the end of next week to come up with another $300, or I'd be out on the street. The thought made my stomach clench with familiar anxiety. I'd been alone since my grandmother died 3 years ago, the last family member I had in the world. No safety net, no one to call when things got desperate. Just me and my determination to survive, one shift at a time. A sudden urgent knocking at my door made me jump, coffee sloshing over the rim of my mug and scalding my thumb. I hissed at the pain, setting the cup down and wiping my hand on my jeans as the knocking came again, more insistent this time. Who would be at my door at 11 o'clock on a night like this? I peered through the peephole, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the distorted glass, I could make out a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair plastered to his head by the rain. He was holding something, no, someone, a small figure wrapped in what looked like a jacket. A child. The man knocked again, and this time I heard his voice through the door. Please, I need help. My son. Every instinct I'd developed living alone in the city told me not to open that door. Strange men didn't knock on single women's apartments in the middle of the night with innocent intentions. But there was something desperate in his voice, something that made me think of all the times I'd needed help and found none. And there was a child involved. My hand moved to the deadbolt before I could talk myself out of it. I cracked the door open, keeping the chain lock engaged, and got my first real look at the stranger on my doorstep. He was soaked through, water dripping from his expensive-looking coat onto the hallway floor. Even drenched and disheveled, there was something commanding about his presence, something that made the small hallway seem suddenly smaller. Dark eyes met mine, and I felt a jolt of recognition I couldn't quite explain. I'd never seen this man before. I was certain of that. But there was something familiar about the intensity of his gaze. Please, he said again, his voice rough. My car broke down 1/2 mile from here. My phone's dead. My son is sick, and I just need somewhere dry until the storm passes. I looked down at the bundle in his arms. A small face peered out from beneath the jacket, pale and flushed with fever. The child couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, his dark hair matted against his forehead, his eyes glassy with illness. The practical part of my brain was screaming at me to shut the door, to call the police, or a shelter, or anyone else who could help them. But the part of me that remembered what it felt like to be cold and scared and alone, that part was already sliding the chain lock free. Come in, I heard myself say, stepping back to let them enter. Quickly, before you both catch pneumonia. The man moved past me with surprising grace, for someone his size, water pooling on my worn linoleum floor as he carried his son inside. Up close, I could see the fine tailoring of his coat despite its sodden state, the quality of his leather shoes now ruined by the rain. These were not the clothes of someone who belonged in my neighborhood. Thank you, he said, his accent slight but noticeable. Italian, I thought. Or maybe something close to it. I'm Tyler. This is Theo. Tessa, I replied automatically, closing and locking the door behind them. The deadbolt sliding into place sounded unnaturally loud in the small space. Let me get you some towels. I hurried to my bathroom, grabbing the 2 thin towels I owned and a washcloth. When I returned, Tyler had set his son down on my second-hand couch, gently removing the wet jacket from the boy's small frame. Theo was shivering violently, his teeth chattering so hard I could hear them from across the room. How long have you been out in this? I asked, handing Tyler the larger towel. Too long, he admitted, wrapping the towel around Theo's shoulders and rubbing vigorously to generate warmth. The car died on Route 9. I tried to carry him to a gas station, but everything's closed because of the storm. I knelt beside the couch, pressing the back of my hand to Theo's forehead. He was burning up, his skin hot and dry despite being soaked through. He needs medicine. Do you have anything for him? Tyler shook his head, frustration evident in the tight set of his jaw. Everything's in the car. His medication, his inhaler, everything. I have some children's fever reducer, I said, remembering the bottle I'd bought 6 months ago when my neighbor's daughter had been sick. It might help until the storm passes and you can get to a pharmacy. I stood, moving to my tiny bathroom medicine cabinet. The bottle was nearly full, and I sent up a silent prayer of thanks that I'd kept it. When I returned, Tyler was wrapping Theo in the spare blanket I kept folded on the back of the couch, his movements surprisingly gentle for someone with such large, capable hands. Thank you, he said softly as I measured out the correct dose. You didn't have to help us. Most people wouldn't have. Most people aren't stupid enough to open their door to strangers in the middle of the night, I replied, but there was no heat in my words. I helped Theo sit up enough to swallow the medicine, supporting his small shoulders as he drank from the cup I offered. The boy's eyes focused on me for the first time, dark and intelligent despite the fever glazing them. Are you an angel? He whispered, his voice hoarse. Something in my chest clenched painfully. No, sweetie. Just a neighbor. You're going to be okay. Theo's eyes drifted closed again, his breathing evening out slightly as the medicine began to take effect. Tyler stood, running a hand through his wet hair, and I got my first real look at him in the light of my small living room. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost dangerous, all sharp angles and strong features. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow, barely visible unless you were looking for it. His hands, as he absently unbuttoned his ruined coat, were strong and capable, with calluses that suggested he did more than sit behind a desk. Everything about him radiated controlled power, the kind that came from knowing exactly what you were capable of. I should get out of these wet clothes, he said, noticing my examination. Do you have anything I could borrow? I'll replace everything, of course. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. I don't think anything I own would fit you. He smiled then, just a slight curve of his lips, but it transformed his face from intimidating to something warmer, more approachable. Fair point. I'll manage. The bathroom's through there. I gestured to the small door beside my bedroom. There's another towel under the sink. I'll see what I can find for you to wear. As Tyler disappeared into the bathroom, I stood alone in my living room with a feverish child on my couch, and a growing sense that I'd just made a decision that would change everything. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside my small apartment, an entirely different kind of tempest was brewing. I rummaged through my drawers, finally pulling out an oversized men's sweatshirt I'd bought at a thrift store years ago, and a pair of sweatpants that might, with luck, fit him. They were shabby and worn, but they were dry. When Tyler emerged from the bathroom, his hair towel-dried and standing up slightly, he looked younger somehow, more human. He'd removed his shirt, and I caught a glimpse of a lean, muscular torso before he pulled the sweatshirt over his head. It was too tight across the shoulders, but would have to do. Thank you, he said again, and I realized he'd been saying that a lot. I know this is a massive imposition. It's fine, I replied, moving to check on Theo. The boy's breathing had settled into something more regular, though his cheeks were still flushed with fever. He should probably stay warm and dry tonight. The storm's supposed to last until morning. Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I can't ask you to let us stay. You didn't ask. I'm offering. I met his eyes directly, surprised by my own boldness. Look, I don't know your situation, and honestly, I probably don't want to know. But your son is sick. It's the middle of the night and there's a storm outside that's only getting worse. You're staying. Something flickered in his dark eyes, an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. You're very trusting for someone who lives alone in the city. I'm not trusting at all, I corrected him. I'm practical. If you wanted to hurt me, you would have done it already. And that little boy needs help more than I need to feel safe. Tyler studied me for a long moment, and I had the distinct feeling I was being assessed, measured against some internal standard I couldn't see. Whatever conclusion he reached, it made him nod slowly. Then we'll stay, just until morning. He glanced around my small apartment, taking in the cracked walls, the secondhand furniture, the general air of someone barely getting by. Thank you, Tessa. Truly. I shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable with his gratitude. I'll make up the couch for him. You can have my bed. I'll sleep in the chair. Absolutely not, Tyler said firmly. You've already done more than enough. I'll take the chair. We argued about it for a few minutes, but eventually settled on Tyler taking the floor beside the couch, close enough to monitor Theo through the night. I provided him with extra blankets and a pillow that had seen better days. As I settled into my own bed, door cracked so I could hear if anything went wrong, I listened to the storm continuing its assault on the city. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and occasional lightning illuminated the cracks around my bedroom door. I should have been terrified, I realized. I'd just let two complete strangers into my home. One of them a man who radiated danger the way other people radiated warmth. But instead, I felt strangely calm, as if some part of me recognized that this moment, this choice, was exactly where I was supposed to be. Through the thin walls, I could hear Tyler's low voice murmuring to his son, soothing words in that accent I couldn't quite place. The sound was oddly comforting, filling the usual silence of my lonely apartment with something that felt almost like family. I closed my eyes, exhaustion finally catching up with me. Tomorrow morning, I told myself, they would leave. Tyler would thank me politely, perhaps press some money into my hand despite my protests, and they would disappear back into whatever world they'd come from. My life would return to its normal routine of double shifts, and instant coffee and counting pennies. But as I drifted toward sleep, some small voice in the back of my mind whispered that nothing would ever be normal again, that by opening my door to Tyler and Theo, I'd opened something else entirely, something that couldn't be closed again, no matter how hard I might try. The storm raged on outside, but inside, in my small apartment that had never felt like home until tonight, something new was beginning. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. I woke to the smell of coffee, real coffee. Not the instant granules I'd grown accustomed to, but the rich, dark aroma of something expensive brewing in my tiny kitchen. For a disoriented moment, I thought I was dreaming, that I'd somehow slipped back into the life I'd had before my grandmother died, before I'd learned what it meant to be truly alone. Then memory crashed back. Tyler. Theo. The storm. I sat up quickly, my heart racing as I pulled on a cardigan over my sleep shirt and padded barefoot into the living room. Sunlight streamed through my windows, the storm having passed in the night, leaving behind a crystalline morning that made everything look clean and new. Tyler stood in my kitchen, somehow looking perfectly at ease despite wearing my oversized sweatshirt and preparing coffee in a space barely large enough for one person. He'd found the French press I'd been given as a gift years ago and never used, and was pouring dark liquid into my chipped mugs with the confidence of someone accustomed to making himself at home anywhere. "Good morning," he said, his voice low to avoid waking Theo, who was still sleeping on the couch. "I hope you don't mind. I found a bodega open down the street and picked up a few things." My eyes moved to the counter, where an array of items I definitely couldn't afford sat in neat rows. Fresh bread, butter, eggs, orange juice, fruit. Real food, not the ramen and canned soup that usually comprised my diet. "You didn't have to do that," I said, suddenly conscious of how I must look, hair tangled from sleep, wearing clothes that had been washed so many times they were more holes than fabric. "You saved us last night," Tyler replied simply, handing me a mug of coffee. "This is the least I can do." I accepted the mug, wrapping both hands around its warmth. The coffee was perfect, strong but not bitter, and I couldn't help the small sound of appreciation that escaped my throat. When was the last time I'd had good coffee? Tyler's lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Sit. Let me make you breakfast." "You really don't have to." "Tessa." The way he said my name stopped my protest cold. There was something in his tone, not quite commanding, but close to it, that made arguing seem pointless. "Sit." I sat at my small table, watching as he moved around my kitchen with surprising efficiency. He'd rolled up the sleeves of the sweatshirt, revealing strong forearms that flexed as he cracked eggs into a bowl. Everything about the way he moved spoke of competence, of a man accustomed to being in control. "How's Theo?" I asked, glancing at the small form still curled on my couch. "Better. His fever broke around 3 this morning." Tyler whisked the eggs with a fork he'd somehow located in my sparse collection of utensils. "Thank you for the medicine. And for everything else." "Anyone would have done the same," I said, though we both knew that wasn't true. "No," Tyler said quietly, his back to me as he poured the eggs into my only frying pan. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have kept their door locked. Some would have called the police. You opened your home to strangers, risked your own safety for a sick child. That's not common, Tessa. That's rare." Something in his voice made me uncomfortable, as if he saw more in my actions than I'd intended. I'd helped them because it was the right thing to do. Nothing more complicated than that. "I should probably get ready for work," I said, standing and moving toward my bedroom. "I have a shift at noon." "On a Sunday?" Tyler glanced over his shoulder, one eyebrow raised. "Tips are better on Sundays," I explained, already pulling out my uniform from where I'd hung it the night before. The black pants and white shirt that marked me as service staff at Roselli's, invisible to most of the customers who sat in our dining room. When I emerged from my bedroom 15 minutes later, showered and dressed for work, Tyler had plated the eggs along with toast and fruit arranged with surprising artistry. He'd even found my grandmother's old linen napkins, the ones I never used because they seemed too nice for someone like me. "This looks amazing," I said honestly, sitting down to a breakfast that was more elaborate than anything I'd eaten in months. "It's nothing," Tyler replied, but he looked pleased as he sat across from me, his long legs barely fitting under my small table. "My mother insisted I learn to cook. She said a man who couldn't feed himself was only half a man." "She sounds wise," I said, taking a bite of eggs that were perfectly fluffy, seasoned with herbs I didn't even know I had. Something shadowed Tyler's expression. "She was. She passed 5 years ago." "I'm sorry." I knew that pain, the particular ache of losing someone who'd been your anchor. I lost my grandmother 3 years ago. She raised me after my parents died. We ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, and I found myself studying Tyler in the morning light. He looked different than he had last night, less desperate, more dangerous. There was something coiled about the way he held himself, like a predator at rest, but ready to spring into action at any moment. "What do you do?" I asked, then immediately regretted the question. It was none of my business. Tyler's eyes met mine, dark and unreadable. "I'm in import and export, family business." It was a vague answer, the kind that invited no follow-up questions. I nodded, taking another bite of toast to avoid having to respond. A small sound from the living room made us both turn. Theo was stirring, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles as he pushed himself into a sitting position. His eyes were clearer than they'd been last night, the fever having done its work and passed. "Papa?" he called out, his voice still hoarse but stronger. "I'm here, Piccolo." Tyler was on his feet instantly, moving to his son's side with a speed that surprised me. He knelt beside the couch, pressing his palm to Theo's forehead with the practiced ease of a parent long accustomed to checking for fever. "How do you feel?" "Hungry," Theo said, and Tyler laughed, the sound rich and warm. "That's a good sign. Come, let's get you washed up and fed." I watched as Tyler helped his son to the bathroom, the gentleness of his touch at odds with everything else about him, the way he adjusted Theo's shirt, the protective hand on the boy's small back, the murmured words of encouragement, all spoke of a deep, abiding love. When they returned, I'd set a third place at the table, scraping together enough from what Tyler had bought to make a child-sized portion. Theo climbed into the chair, his legs swinging well above the floor, and gave me a shy smile. "Thank you for helping us last night," he said with a formality that seemed practiced. "Papa says you're very kind." "You're welcome, sweetheart." I found myself smiling despite the strangeness of the situation. "I'm glad you're feeling better." As Theo ate, Tyler's phone, which he'd evidently retrieved from his wet clothes and plugged in to charge, began to buzz incessantly. He glanced at it, his expression darkening, then picked it up and moved to my small window, speaking in rapid Italian too low for me to hear. I focused on Theo, asking him about school, about his favorite subjects. He was bright, articulate for his age, and clearly well-educated. He told me about his art classes, about the dog he wanted but his papa said they couldn't have yet, about his nonna who made the best pasta in the world. "We're supposed to visit her next month," Theo said, his face lighting up. "She lives far away, but Papa promised we could go for Christmas." Tyler returned to the table, sliding his phone into his pocket with a tension that hadn't been there before. "Tessa, I need to make a call. Would you mind watching Theo for a few minutes?" "Of course not," I said, though something in his tone made my stomach tighten with unease. Tyler stepped into my bedroom, closing the door behind him. Even through the thin walls, I could hear his voice rising, sharp with anger, though the words remained indistinct. Theo seemed unbothered, continuing to eat his breakfast and tell me about his favorite cartoon. When Tyler emerged 5 minutes later, his expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set. Something had happened. Something that changed whatever plans he'd had for the morning. "Tessa," he said, his voice controlled. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I stood, wiping my suddenly damp palms on my work pants. "Okay. Last night, after we arrived, did you tell anyone we were here? Call anyone? Text anyone? Mention it to a neighbor?" "No," I said, confused by the question. "I don't really have anyone to call. Why?" Tyler ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I was beginning to recognize. "Because someone knows we're here, and that's a problem." "I don't understand," I said, even as a chill ran down my spine. "What kind of problem?" He looked at Theo, who was still focused on his breakfast, oblivious to the tension in the room. When Tyler's eyes returned to mine, there was something in them that made my breath catch. Not quite fear, but close to it. Calculation, assessment, the look of a man weighing impossible options. "The kind that means I can't leave you here alone," he said finally. "Not now. Not after you've been seen with us." "Seen by who?" My voice rose despite my effort to stay calm. "Tyler, what's going on?" He stepped closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "I'm going to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm insane. But I need you to listen carefully because your safety depends on it." My heart was hammering now, that flight response finally kicking in 12 hours too late. "You're scaring me." "Good," Tyler said, not unkindly. "You should be scared, because by helping us last night, by letting us into your home, you've made yourself visible to some very dangerous people. People who will use you to get to me if they can." "Who are you?" I whispered, though part of me had already begun to piece it together. The expensive clothes, the commanding presence, the vague explanation of his business, the phone call that had changed everything. Tyler held my gaze, unflinching. "My full name is Tyler Valentino. My family has been in the import-export business for 4 generations, but that's not all we do. We're also what most people would call organized crime." The words hung in the air between us, impossible and yet completely believable. I should have laughed, should have told him to get out, should have called the police. Instead, I found myself thinking about all the little details I'd noticed and ignored. The way he moved, the confidence that came from never questioning your own authority, the casual use of Italian, the careful way he'd assessed my apartment as if cataloging exits and vulnerabilities. "You're in the Mafia," I said flatly. "That's a simplification, but yes, essentially." Tyler's expression remained steady, giving me the space to process. "And last night, someone tried to kill Theo and me. Our car didn't break down, Tessa. It was sabotaged. We barely made it out before they caught up with us." I sank into my chair, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. "And you came here. You brought that danger to my door." "I had no choice," Tyler said, and for the first time, I heard something like regret in his voice. "It was the closest safe place, and Theo was sick. I thought we could wait out the storm and leave before anyone noticed. But they're watching now. They saw you let us in. They saw us together this morning when I went to get food." "So what does that mean?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. Tyler pulled out the chair beside me, sitting so we were at eye level. "It means that as of right now, you're a target. They'll assume you're important to me, that you might have information they can use. They'll come for you, either to interrogate you or to use you as leverage against me." "But I'm not important to you," I protested. "I'm just someone who opened a door. Tell them that. Tell them I don't know anything." "It doesn't matter what's true," Tyler said gently. "It only matters what they believe. And right now they believe you're connected to me. That makes you a threat to them and a resource they can exploit." I looked at Theo, still sitting at my table, innocently eating toast. This sweet child with his father's dark eyes and his shy smile. This boy who'd called me an angel. And because I'd helped him, because I'd done what any decent person would do, my life was now in danger. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Tyler's hand covered mine on the table, warm and solid. "You come with us. I have a safe house about an hour from here. You stay there until we can neutralize the threat and make sure you're not in danger anymore." "I can't just leave," I said, pulling my hand away. "I have work. I have rent due. I have a life here." "You have a life you can return to," Tyler corrected, "but only if you're alive to return to it. Tessa, please. I'm trying to protect you from a situation I created." "How long?" I asked, my mind already racing through implications. How many shifts would I miss? Would Roselli's fire me? How would I explain any of this? A few days, maybe a week. Tyler's expression was sincere, or at least as sincere as I imagined a man like him could be. I have people working to identify who's targeting us. Once they're dealt with, you can come back. I'll make sure your job is secure, your rent is paid. You won't lose anything. Except my sense of safety, I said bitterly. Except my peace of mind. I know, Tyler said quietly. And I'm sorry. But this is the reality now. You can fight it, or you can accept my protection. Those are your only options. I looked around my shabby apartment, at the life I'd built from nothing after my grandmother died. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My independence, hard-won and carefully maintained. And now this man, this dangerous, compelling man who'd appeared on my doorstep in a storm, was asking me to give it all up, even temporarily. Miss Tessa? Theo's small voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. Are you coming with us? Papa says you might, and I hope you do. You're nice. I looked at the boy's hopeful face, at Tyler's steady gaze, and felt the walls of my carefully controlled life crumbling around me. I should say no. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, to take my chances, to believe that somehow this wouldn't touch me. But I remembered my grandmother's favorite saying, the one she'd repeated whenever life threw us a curveball. When the storm comes, you don't fight the wind. You find shelter and wait for it to pass. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll come with you. Just until it's safe. Tyler's shoulders relaxed minutely, relief evident in the line of his body. Thank you. I promise you, Tessa, I will keep you safe, no matter what it takes. As I moved to my bedroom to pack a bag, my hands trembling slightly as I pulled clothes from drawers, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at a crossroads, that the choice I'd just made would echo far beyond a few days in a safe house, that by agreeing to accept Tyler Valentino's protection, I was stepping into a world I couldn't begin to understand. Through my bedroom door, I could hear Theo's laughter as Tyler said something that amused him. The sound was bright and innocent, untouched by the darkness that surrounded his father's life. And despite everything, despite the fear and the uncertainty, I found myself wanting to protect that laughter, to keep that innocent joy alive. I didn't know it yet, but in that moment, my fate was sealed. Not by Tyler's danger or his enemies' threats, but by something far more powerful, a lonely woman's desperate, unacknowledged need to belong to something, to someone, to matter. The storm had passed outside, but inside, a new one was just beginning to build. The car that picked us up 20 minutes later was nothing like the vehicle I'd expected. No flashy sports car or ostentatious limousine. Instead, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to my building, so ordinary it was almost invisible. The driver, a man with silver-threaded dark hair and a scar along his jawline, nodded to Tyler with the familiarity of long association. Marco, Tyler greeted him, his hand protectively on Theo's shoulder as we approached the vehicle. Any problems? Nothing we couldn't handle, Marco replied, his accent thicker than Tyler's. His eyes flickered to me, assessing, cataloging. This is her? This is Tessa, Tyler said, something sharp entering his tone. She's under my protection. Make sure everyone knows it. Marco's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, some message passing between the two men that I couldn't decipher. Of course, boss. Boss. The word sent a fresh wave of reality crashing over me. This wasn't just Tyler, the desperate father seeking shelter. This was Tyler Valentino, leader of something I was only beginning to understand. The interior of the SUV was luxurious in an understated way. Soft leather seats, climate control that immediately warmed the chill from my bones. and what looked like bulletproof glass in the windows. That last detail made my stomach clench. Who needed bulletproof glass if they weren't expecting bullets? Theo climbed into the back seat, and Tyler gestured for me to follow. I slid in beside the boy, hyper-aware of Tyler settling on my other side, his presence filling the space with that particular intensity I was beginning to associate with him. Marco got behind the wheel, and another man I hadn't noticed before took the passenger seat, his eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. As we pulled away from my building, I watched my apartment grow smaller in the side mirror. Everything I owned was in that shabby space, or in the single bag I'd hastily packed. My life, such as it was, contained in a few hundred square feet and one battered duffel bag. "You okay?" Tyler's voice was low, meant only for me. "I don't know," I admitted, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood slide past. "This doesn't feel real." "I know the feeling," he said, and something in his tone made me look at him. His expression was distant, as if remembering his own moment of crossing from one world into another. "It gets easier." "Does it?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. Instead of responding, Tyler pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. I caught glimpses of messages in Italian, responses coming in almost immediately. The phone buzzed constantly, a reminder that while we sat in this moving bubble of leather and climate control, Tyler's world continued to turn, continued to make demands. Theo, seemingly unconcerned by the tension, pulled a small sketchbook from his backpack and began to draw, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. I watched his small hands move across the paper, creating what looked like a castle with improbable towers and flags. "That's beautiful," I said softly, and he beamed at me. "It's where knights live," he explained with the seriousness only a child could muster. "They protect people from dragons." "Very important work," I agreed, trying to ignore the irony of seeking protection from a man whose world was built on violence. The drive took longer than Tyler had suggested, nearly 2 hours of winding through progressively more rural areas. The city fell away, replaced first by suburbs, then by stretches of forest, interrupted by occasional estates hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. Old money, I realized. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Finally, we turned onto a private road, passing through a security gate that opened automatically at our approach. The driveway was long and tree-lined, revealing glimpses of manicured grounds before the house itself came into view. I'd expected something ostentatious, all marble columns and gold fixtures. Instead, the safe house was a sprawling stone and timber structure that looked like it had grown organically from the landscape. Large windows reflected the afternoon sun, and a wraparound porch suggested lazy summer evenings that felt at odds with the reality of why we were here. "It's beautiful," I breathed before I could stop myself. "It was my mother's favorite place," Tyler said quietly. "She designed most of it, said she wanted somewhere that felt like a home, not a fortress." He paused, his eyes on the house. "Though it's both, really." Marco pulled up to the front entrance where 2 more men in dark suits waited. The security was obvious now, no longer hidden behind the veneer of normalcy. These were guards, and from the way they held themselves, they were armed and dangerous. "Nico, Leo," Tyler greeted them as we exited the vehicle. "Status?" "Perimeter is secure," the taller one, Nico, reported. "No movement detected since we arrived this morning. House is clear. Provisions have been stocked as requested." Tyler nodded, then turned to me, his hand finding the small of my back in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. "Come, let me show you around." The interior of the house matched the exterior's understated elegance. Warm wood floors, comfortable furniture that invited you to sink in and stay, artwork that looked original and expensive. But beneath the homey atmosphere, I noticed the details that marked this as more than a simple country retreat. security cameras discreetly positioned in corners, windows that were likely reinforced, doors that looked solid enough to withstand a siege. "The kitchen is through here," Tyler said, guiding me through a living room with a massive stone fireplace. "Fully stocked. Make yourself at home. There's a library upstairs if you like to read, and the grounds are safe to walk during the day." "But not at night," I guessed. His expression grew serious. "Not alone, no." He led me up a curved staircase to the second floor, Theo racing ahead to what was apparently his usual room. The hallway was lined with doors, and Tyler opened one near the end, revealing a spacious bedroom decorated in soft blues and creams. "This is yours," he said, setting my duffel bag on the bed. "Private bathroom through there. If you need anything at all, just ask." I looked around the room, taking in the four-poster bed that looked like something from a magazine. The sitting area by the window with views of the forested grounds, the fresh flowers on the dresser. It was more luxury than I'd experienced in my entire life. "Tyler, this is too much," I said, feeling overwhelmed. "I can't—" "Yes, you can," he interrupted gently. "Tessa, you're here because of me, because I brought danger to your door. The least I can do is make sure you're comfortable while we sort this out." "And when it's sorted out?" I asked, needing to hear him say it again. "I can go back to my life?" Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "Yes. When it's safe, you can go back to your life." He left me then, closing the door quietly behind him. I sank onto the edge of the bed, its softness almost uncomfortable after years of my lumpy mattress at home. Through the window, I could see the tree line, the manicured lawns, the wealth that surrounded this place like armor. I should have been relieved. I was safe here, protected by men with guns and security systems that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. But instead, I felt unmoored, cast adrift from everything familiar. A soft knock at my door made me stand. "Come in," I called, expecting Tyler, or maybe one of the staff I'd glimpsed in the kitchen. Instead, Theo poked his head in, his expression tentative. "Miss Tessa? Papa is busy with work. Can I show you my room?" I couldn't help but smile at his earnestness. "I'd love to see your room." I followed him down the hall to what was clearly a child's paradise. Toys organized on shelves, a bed shaped like a racing car, walls painted with a mural of a forest scene complete with hidden animals. It was a room designed with love, meant to make a child feel safe and special. "This is amazing, Theo," I said, watching as he pulled out various treasures to show me. A collection of smooth stones from the beach, a set of watercolors, a stuffed lion that had clearly been well loved. "Papa says we come here when things are complicated," Theo explained, holding the lion against his chest. "But I like it here. It's quiet, and nobody bothers us." The simple statement held so much unspoken complexity. How often had this child had to flee to safety? How young had he been when he'd first learned that his father's world required places like this, fortresses disguised as homes? "Do you miss your friends when you're here?" I asked, sitting on the floor beside him as he began to line up toy cars. Theo shrugged, a gesture too old for his years. "I don't have many friends. Papa says it's safer that way." My heart clenched. What kind of life was this for a child? Always guarded, always careful, always aware that he couldn't be like other kids. And yet, looking at Theo's face as he made engine sounds for his toy cars, I saw a resilient joy that somehow persisted despite everything. "Well," I said, picking up a red sports car, "you have a friend now, if you want one." Theo's face lit up with a smile so bright it made my chest ache. "Really? You'll be my friend?" "Really," I promised, and felt the weight of that promise settle over me like a mantle. We played for nearly an hour, Theo's imagination creating elaborate scenarios for his toy cars to navigate. He was bright and creative, narrating stories with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of childhood. I found myself laughing at his dramatic sound effects, at the way he made each car have a distinct personality. The sun was beginning to set when Tyler appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with an expression I couldn't quite read. Soft, almost tender, watching us together. "Theo, time to wash up for dinner," he said, his voice gentle. "But Papa, we're right in the middle of a race," Theo protested, though he was already putting his cars away with practiced efficiency. "The race can continue tomorrow," Tyler said firmly but kindly. "Go on, Piccolo. Use the bathroom down the hall." Theo scampered off, leaving Tyler and me alone in the colorful room. I stood, brushing invisible dust from my jeans, suddenly self-conscious under his steady gaze. "Thank you," Tyler said quietly, "for being kind to him. Not everyone would be, given the circumstances." "He's a great kid," I replied honestly. "Sweet and smart and creative. You should be proud." Something vulnerable flashed across Tyler's face. "I am. More than anything else I've done. He's what I'm most proud of." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "His mother died when he was 3. Complications from an illness that came on suddenly. Since then, it's just been the 2 of us." "I'm sorry," I said, understanding a little better now. The fierce protectiveness, the carefully controlled environment, the isolation. Tyler was trying to keep his son safe in a world where safety was a luxury, not a given. "She would have liked you," Tyler said, pushing off from the doorframe. "She had the same kind heart, the same instinct to help, even when it was dangerous." He met my eyes. It got her killed in the end. The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Was that a warning? An explanation? Or simply the truth of his world, where kindness was a liability? "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, Tyler continued, his tone shifting back to that careful neutrality. "Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. I hope you're hungry." I followed him downstairs, through hallways that felt less intimidating now that I'd spent time with Theo, seen the normal life that existed alongside the danger. The dining room was warm and inviting, a large wooden table set for 3. No staff hovering, no formality. Just a table set for a family dinner. Tyler moved into the kitchen with the same comfortable efficiency he'd shown in my apartment, pulling ingredients from the industrial-sized refrigerator and setting about preparing the meal. I offered to help, and he accepted with a small smile, guiding me through the steps of making a proper Italian ragu. "My mother taught me this recipe," he said, demonstrating how to properly dice an onion. "She said if you couldn't cook, you couldn't live. Food is life, and life should be celebrated." Working beside him, I caught glimpses of a different Tyler. Not the mob boss or the protective father, but simply a man who found peace in the ritual of preparing food. His hands moved with practiced grace, chopping and stirring with the confidence of long familiarity. Theo reappeared, his face freshly washed and hair damp, climbing into a chair at the table and watching us with bright eyes. "Are you teaching Miss Tessa to cook, Papa?" "I'm trying," Tyler said with mock seriousness. "Though I think she's teaching me that not everyone learned to make pasta from scratch at age 6. "That's because not everyone had your nonna," I pointed out, and Tyler laughed, the sound rich and genuine. We ate together as the sun set fully outside, the dining room illuminated by candles Tyler had lit without fanfare. The pasta was perfect, rich and flavorful in a way that made my usual meals seem like a pale imitation of food. Theo chattered between bites, telling elaborate stories about the adventures his toy cars would have tomorrow. It felt for a moment like a real family dinner. The kind I'd watched through windows as a child, the kind I'd imagined when my grandmother would tuck me in at night. Easy laughter, good food, the comfortable silence that comes from genuine connection. But underneath, threading through every moment of normalcy, was the constant awareness of why we were really here, the guards outside, the security cameras, the danger that had driven us to this beautiful prison. After dinner, Tyler insisted on clearing the dishes himself, sending Theo up to prepare for bed. I offered to help again, and we worked side by side in the kitchen, the domestic routine strangely intimate. "Can I ask you something?" I ventured, drying a plate with a dish towel that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "You can ask," Tyler replied, his attention on the pot he was scrubbing. "I might not answer." "Fair enough." I set the dried plate on the stack. "Why me? Why did you come to my door specifically? There must have been other buildings, other options." Tyler was quiet for a long moment, his hands stilling in the soapy water. "Yours was the only light on," he said finally. "In the whole building, your window was the only one glowing. And I thought, there's someone awake at this hour, maybe someone who understands what it's like to be alone in the dark." The simplicity of the explanation made my throat tight. "And were you right?" He turned to face me, water dripping from his hands, his expression more open than I'd seen it. "Yes, I think I was exactly right." We stood there in the warm kitchen, the space between us charged with something I couldn't name. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. The kind of connection that happens when two people see something familiar in each other's loneliness. The moment broke when Theo's voice called from upstairs. "Papa, I'm ready for my story." Tyler's lips quirked in a small smile. "Duty calls." He dried his hands on a towel. "Make yourself at home, Tessa. Watch TV, read, explore. This is your home for now. Act like it." After he disappeared upstairs, I wandered through the first floor, exploring the space that was supposed to be my temporary sanctuary. The library he'd mentioned was impressive, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books in multiple languages. I ran my fingers along the spines, pulling out a worn copy of Jane Eyre and settling into a leather armchair by the window. I tried to read, but the words swam on the page, my mind too full of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Less than a day ago, I'd been alone in my apartment, worried about rent and shifts at Roselli's. Now I was in a mansion in the woods, under the protection of a man who'd casually admitted to being involved in organized crime. The absurdity of it should have made me laugh. Instead, I found tears sliding down my cheeks, silent and unexpected. Not tears of fear exactly, but of release. The tension I'd been carrying since Tyler's revelation finally finding an outlet. I didn't hear him approach until he was kneeling beside my chair, his large hand covering mine on the book's cover. "Tessa," he said softly, "talk to me." "I don't know what to say," I admitted, wiping at my cheeks with my free hand. "This is all so much. Yesterday I was nobody, a waitress barely making rent, and now I'm here, in this beautiful house. And there are men with guns outside because knowing you has made me a target. It's insane." "I know," Tyler said, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of my hand. "And I'm sorry. I wish I could change it. Could make it so my world hadn't touched yours. But it has. And now all I can do is keep you safe until it's over." "And then what?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me since we left my apartment. "I go back to my life, and you go back to yours, and we pretend this never happened." Tyler's expression grew troubled. "Would that be so bad? To go back to normal?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if normal exists anymore after this." He stood, offering me his hand. "Come. Let me show you something." I let him pull me to my feet and lead me through the house to a door I hadn't noticed before. It opened onto the back porch, and beyond it, the grounds were illuminated by soft landscape lighting. The air was crisp and clean, scented with pine and earth. Tyler guided me down a stone path to a gazebo overlooking a small pond. The water reflected the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. It was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. "When things get overwhelming," Tyler said, his voice low, "I come here. It reminds me that there's a world beyond the business, beyond the danger. A world that's simple and clean and untouched by what I do." We sat on the built-in bench, the space between us smaller than it needed to be. "Do you ever wish you could escape to that world?" I asked. "Leave the business behind?" "Every day," Tyler admitted, surprising me with his honesty. "But it's not that simple. The business is my family's legacy. It's what feeds hundreds of people who depend on us. And it's what keeps Theo safe, ironically enough. The moment I walk away, we become vulnerable." "So you're trapped," I observed, "in a different way than me, but trapped nonetheless." He turned to look at me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Maybe we're both looking for a way out we haven't found yet. The implication in his words made my heart race. Was he suggesting what I thought he was suggesting? That maybe this temporary arrangement could become something else? Something more permanent? Before I could analyze it further, Tyler stood, offering me his hand again. "It's late. You should rest. Tomorrow things might get complicated." "More complicated than they already are?" I asked with a weak attempt at humor. His smile was genuine but tinged with regret. "Unfortunately, yes." As we walked back to the house, I felt the weight of the day settling over me like a heavy blanket. Exhaustion pulled at my limbs, made my thoughts fuzzy around the edges. Tyler walked me to my door, his hand lingering on my elbow. "Sleep well, Tessa," he said softly. "You're safe here, I promise." I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this beautiful house with its guards and security systems could keep the danger at bay. But as I closed my bedroom door and locked it out of habit, I couldn't shake the feeling that safety was an illusion. That the moment I'd opened my door to Tyler Valentino, I'd invited in something that couldn't be kept out by locks or guards or good intentions. I changed into the silk pajamas I found folded in the dresser, far nicer than anything I'd ever owned, and climbed into the enormous bed. Through the window, I could see the tree line swaying gently in the night breeze, could make out the subtle movements of guards patrolling the grounds. Tomorrow might bring complications, as Tyler had warned. But tonight, in this moment, I was warm and safe, and surrounded by a luxury I'd never imagined. And somewhere down the hall, a little boy slept peacefully, dreaming of toy cars and castles. A little boy who'd called me his friend. Maybe, I thought as sleep finally claimed me, maybe this could work. Maybe for just a little while, I could pretend this was my life, that I belonged here, in this house, with these people. It was a dangerous fantasy. But as I drifted off, I couldn't bring myself to care. I woke to the sound of raised voices. For a disoriented moment, I thought I was back in my apartment, listening to neighbors argue through paper-thin walls. Then the soft sheets against my skin and the faint scent of pine through the open window reminded me where I was. Tyler's safe house. His world. A world I was beginning to realize was far more complicated than he'd let on. The voices were coming from downstairs, muffled but intense. One was Tyler's, the controlled anger unmistakable even through the floor. The other was unfamiliar, deeper, with an edge that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. 6:15 in the morning. Through the window, dawn was just beginning to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, the grounds emerging from shadow with stunning beauty that felt at odds with the tension thrumming through the house. I should stay in my room, should give them privacy for whatever business was being conducted. But curiosity and a growing sense of unease pulled me from the bed. I pulled on the robe I'd found hanging in the bathroom. cream-colored silk that felt sinfully soft against my skin, and cracked open my door. The voices were clearer now, coming from what I thought was Tyler's study on the first floor. "Can't keep her here indefinitely," the unfamiliar voice was saying. "It's too dangerous, Tyler. For her, and for us." "I'm aware of the risks, Antonio." Tyler's voice was tight with frustration. "But sending her back now would be signing her death warrant. Carmine's men are watching her building. They know she matters." "She doesn't matter," Antonio shot back. "That's the point. She's a nobody, a waitress you spent one night with. Let them figure that out on their own." I pressed my hand against the wall, steadying myself. One night? What was he talking about? "It doesn't work that way, and you know it." Tyler's voice dropped to a dangerous register I hadn't heard before. "They saw me bring her here. They saw me protect her. That makes her important whether she actually is or not. Perception is reality in our world." "Then change the perception," Antonio argued. "Pay her off. Set her up somewhere far away with a new identity. But don't keep her here like some pet you're sheltering. It makes you look weak, like you're letting a woman dictate your decisions." There was a long pause, and when Tyler spoke again, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. "Get out. Tyler, I'm trying to help. Get out of my house, Antonio. Now." I heard footsteps, heavy and angry, moving toward the front of the house. A door slammed. Then silence, thick and oppressive. I should have retreated to my room. Should have pretended I'd heard nothing. Instead, I found myself descending the stairs, drawn by a need to understand what Antonio had meant. One night. What night? Tyler was standing in the study doorway when I reached the first floor, his back to me, shoulders tense beneath his expensive shirt. He'd dressed for the day in dark slacks and a light blue dress shirt, every inch the successful businessman. Only the rigid set of his spine betrayed his agitation. "How much did you hear?" he asked without turning around. "Enough to be confused," I admitted. "Who's Carmine? And what did Antonio mean about one night?" Tyler turned to face me, his expression carefully neutral. But I was learning to read the small tells, the tightness around his eyes, the slight clench of his jaw. He was deciding how much to tell me. "Come in," he said finally, gesturing to the study. "We should talk." The study was masculine and elegant, lined with books and expensive-looking artwork. A large desk dominated the space, its surface cluttered with papers and a laptop. Through the window behind it, I could see the grounds bathed in early morning light, deceptively peaceful. Tyler moved to a sideboard and poured 2 glasses of water, handing me one before settling into the chair behind his desk. I took the chair opposite, feeling like I was being called in for a performance review. "First, Carmine," Tyler began, his tone businesslike. "Carmine Russo runs a rival organization. We've had an uneasy truce for the past 5 years, but recently, he's been making moves to expand into territory we control. The attempt on Theo and me 2 nights ago was his work. He tried to kill a child." I couldn't keep the horror from my voice. "He tried to kill me," Tyler corrected. "Theo being in the car was unfortunate collateral damage as far as Carmine's concerned. That's the kind of man he is. Ruthless, ambitious, and completely without conscience." I took a sip of water, trying to process this information. "And he thinks I'm important to you because I helped you that night." "Yes." Tyler's eyes met mine steadily. "His men have been watching your building since we left. They've made inquiries at Roselli's, asking about you. They know your name, your schedule, your routines. They're building a profile, trying to determine how much leverage you represent." The thought of strange men watching me, learning about me, made my skin crawl. "But I'm not leverage. I'm nobody to you. Just someone who answered a door." "That's what Antonio was arguing," Tyler said. "That the smart play is to distance myself from you publicly, Make it clear you mean nothing to me. But there's a problem with that strategy. What problem? Tyler leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. I can't make myself not care about your safety. And Carmine knows that. He's very good at reading people, at finding their weaknesses and exploiting them. The moment I showed concern for you, brought you here, put you under my protection, I telegraphed that you matter. And now that perception exists, I can't simply unmake it. I set my water glass down with slightly shaking hands. So I'm stuck here, because you care about what happens to me. Yes, Tyler said simply, though I'm beginning to think stuck might not be the right word. Something in his tone made my heart skip. What do you mean? He stood, moving to the window, his back to me again. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable than I'd heard it. Antonio mentioned one night. He was referring to something that happened 6 months ago. A night I thought I'd never have to explain to you because I never expected to see you again. Cold dread settled in my stomach. Tyler, what are you talking about? He turned to face me, and in his eyes, I saw something that looked like regret. 6 months ago, I was in Manhattan on business. I stopped at a small cafe in your neighborhood, a place called Rosa's on the corner of 38th and Lexington. I finished, my voice barely a whisper. My hands gripped the arms of the chair as memory rushed back. There was a man. He bought my coffee when my card was declined. We talked for hours. He said his name was Michael, Tyler supplied. Michael Santos, a name I sometimes use when I don't want to be Tyler Valentino. The room seemed to tilt around me. That afternoon in Rosa's, the handsome stranger with the warm smile and easy conversation, we'd talked about books, about favorite foods, about dreams and disappointments. He'd made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in months. When closing time came, he'd walked me home, and at my door, he'd kissed me with a gentleness that had made my knees weak. You left, I said, the memory vivid now. I invited you up for coffee, and you said you had an early flight. You kissed me goodbye and said you'd call, but you never did. I know, Tyler said quietly, and I'm sorry. That night with you, it was the most real I'd felt in years. But by the next morning, reality had reasserted itself. I was Tyler Valentino again, with responsibilities and enemies and a son to protect. There was no room in that life for a woman like you. Someone genuine and kind and uncomplicated. I stood, needing to move, to put space between us. So you just forgot about me? Moved on with your life? I tried, Tyler admitted. But I couldn't forget you, Tessa. Couldn't forget your laugh or the way you lit up when you talked about the books you loved. Couldn't forget how for a few hours I'd felt like just a man, not a criminal, not a boss. Just Michael talking to a beautiful woman in a cafe. Stop, I said, pressing my hands to my temples. Just stop. You're telling me that the night I sheltered you wasn't random? That you recognized me? Not at first, Tyler said quickly. That night, in the storm, I was focused on getting Theo somewhere safe. But when you opened the door, when the light fell on your face, I knew. I knew exactly who you were. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. And you didn't say anything. You let me think we were strangers. Because we were strangers, Tyler insisted, moving closer. One afternoon in a cafe doesn't make us anything more than that. And I thought, maybe it was better this way. Better that you never knew I'd lied about my name, about who I was. But I know now, I said, my voice breaking slightly. And I don't know what to do with that information, Tyler. Michael, whoever you are. I'm both, he said softly. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Michael Santos was me. maybe the most honest version of myself I've been in years. But Tyler Valentino is also me. The dangerous parts, the complicated parts, the parts that come with guards and safe houses and men who want me dead. I moved to the window, staring out at the grounds without really seeing them. Why didn't you call? After that day? Because I knew it couldn't go anywhere, Tyler said, his voice right behind me now. I knew that getting involved with you would put you in danger, that my world would eventually touch yours, and when it did, it would destroy whatever we might have built. And yet, here we are, I said bitterly. Your world touched mine anyway, and now I'm in danger because of you, just like you feared. Yes, Tyler agreed. The irony isn't lost on me. I turned to face him and was surprised to find him closer than I'd realized. Close enough that I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the genuine regret in his expression. What do you want from me, Tyler? I asked. Forgiveness? Understanding? Permission to assuage your guilt? I want you to know the truth, he said simply. All of it, including the fact that when you opened your door 2 nights ago, part of me was terrified. Not because of Carmine or the danger, but because I knew I was bringing you into my world, despite every effort I'd made to keep you out of it. You could have gone to anyone's door, I pointed out. Why mine specifically? Tyler's hand came up, his fingers barely touching my cheek. Because I remembered which building was yours. Because some part of me, the part that's been thinking about you for 6 months, wanted an excuse to see you again, even if it was dangerous, even if it was selfish. I should have pulled away. Should have told him that his confession changed nothing, that I was still just a waitress caught up in his dangerous world, counting the days until I could go home. But I couldn't deny the flutter in my chest, the way my body responded to his proximity. I don't know what to believe anymore, I whispered. Believe this, Tyler said, his voice low and intense. Everything I told you about the danger is true. Everything I'm doing to keep you safe is real. And everything I felt that day in the cafe, everything Michael felt, was genuine. That man exists, Tessa. He's just buried under a lot of complicated, dangerous reality. A door slammed somewhere in the house, breaking the moment. Tyler stepped back, his professional mask sliding into place with practiced ease. That'll be Marco with the morning reports, he said, his tone shifting back to business. I need to deal with some things. Will you be okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Tyler studied me for another moment, as if memorizing my face, then left the study. I heard his voice in the hallway, speaking rapid Italian to Marco, the words too quick for me to follow. I sank back into the chair, my mind reeling. 6 months ago, I'd met a man named Michael in a cafe. We'd shared an afternoon that I'd thought about more often than I cared to admit, wondering what might have been if he'd called like he'd promised. Now I knew. Michael was Tyler, and the fairy tale afternoon had been built on lies. But was it really lies if the connection had been real? If the man I'd talked to that day was a true version of Tyler, just wearing a different name? I didn't know. Didn't know what to think or feel or do with this information. A soft knock on the doorframe made me look up. Theo stood there in his pajamas, his dark hair adorably mussed from sleep, holding his stuffed lion. Miss Tessa? He said hesitantly. Are you sad? I managed a smile, gesturing for him to come in. Just thinking, sweetheart. Are you hungry? Should we make some breakfast? His face lit up. Can we make pancakes? Papa never makes them right. They're always too flat. I laughed despite everything, standing and taking his small hand. Then let's show your papa how it's done properly. As we walked to the kitchen together, Theo chattering about the perfect pancake thickness, I felt some of my turmoil settle. Whatever complicated history Tyler and I had, whatever danger lurked outside these walls, in this moment, I could make pancakes with a sweet little boy who just wanted breakfast. The kitchen was empty when we arrived, Tyler presumably still dealing with business. I found ingredients and began mixing batter while Theo sat on the counter, swinging his legs and directing me with the seriousness of a master chef. "You have to let the bubbles pop before you flip them," he instructed. "That's the secret." "Your nonna teach you that?" I asked, pouring the first pancake onto the griddle. "Yes. She knows everything about cooking." His expression grew wistful. "I miss her. We haven't visited in a long time because Papa says it's not safe right now." The casual mention of danger, so normalized in this child's life, made my heart ache. "I'm sure you'll see her soon," I said, hoping it was true. We'd made a stack of reasonably successful pancakes when Tyler returned, his expression lightening slightly at the sight of us together. "Something smells good," he observed, leaning against the doorframe. "Miss Tessa makes proper pancakes," Theo announced proudly. "Not flat ones like yours, Papa." Tyler pressed a hand to his chest in mock offense. "My pancakes are not flat. They're delicate." "They're flat," Theo and I said in unison, and then laughed at the synchronicity. Tyler's eyes met mine over Theo's head, and something passed between us. An acknowledgement of the complicated truth that now lay between us, but also an understanding that for Theo's sake, we would maintain normalcy. We would be adults about this. We ate breakfast together, the conversation light and easy on the surface. Tyler asked about my plans for the day, suggested I might enjoy the library or the gardens. Theo begged me to play cards with him again, and I agreed, grateful for the distraction. After breakfast, Tyler retreated to his study to make calls, and I spent the morning with Theo. We built elaborate racetracks using books as ramps, created stories for each of his toy cars, and drew pictures of fantastical creatures. The boy's imagination was boundless, and his laughter was infectious. Around noon, Marco appeared in the doorway of Theo's playroom. "Miss Reeves," he said, his accent thick. "Mr. Valentino would like to see you in his study when you have a moment." The formal tone made my stomach tighten. This wasn't a casual invitation. This was a summons. "I'll be right there," I said, then turned to Theo. "Think you can work on that castle drawing we started while I talk to your papa?" Theo nodded, already reaching for his crayons. I followed Marco downstairs, my apprehension growing with each step. Tyler was on the phone when I entered, but he gestured for me to sit. He was speaking in Italian, his tone clipped and businesslike. I caught my name once, then Carmine's, but nothing else I could understand. He ended the call and set the phone down, his expression grave. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Another one?" I asked, trying for levity that fell flat. "Carmine has made contact," Tyler said. "He wants to meet, to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" Tyler's jaw tightened. "You. He wants to confirm that you're actually important to me before he makes his next move. If I refuse to meet, he'll assume you're leverage worth taking. If I meet him, I'm confirming his suspicions." "So it's a lose-lose situation," I observed. "Unless," Tyler said slowly, "we turn it into an opportunity. If I meet with him, I can try to negotiate a truce, convince him that escalating this conflict isn't in anyone's interest. But to do that effectively, I need him to believe you matter to me." "And do I?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "Matter to you?" Tyler held my gaze. "Yes," he said simply. More than is probably wise. The admission hung between us, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to examine. "What do you need from me?" I asked instead. "I need you to come to the meeting," Tyler said, "to be seen with me, to make it clear to Carmine that yes, you're under my protection, and yes, harming you would have consequences." You want to use me as bait, I said, echoing Antonio's words from this morning. I want to use the perception of your importance as a negotiating tool, Tyler corrected. There's a difference. You'll be safe. I'll have men there, security measures in place. Carmine won't risk an open confrontation at a public meeting. It's not his style. And what if he doesn't agree to a truce? I asked. What if seeing me just makes me a bigger target? Then we deal with that, Tyler said firmly. But right now, this is our best option. Our only option, really, to end this without prolonged conflict that could put Theo at risk. The mention of Theo was a low blow, and Tyler knew it. He watched me process, watched me realize that I cared about that little boy's safety enough to take risks I wouldn't take for my own. When? I asked quietly. Tomorrow night. A restaurant in Manhattan, very public, very safe. You'll sit with me, have dinner, show a united front. That's all I'm asking. That's all? I laughed humorlessly. Tyler, I'm terrified. I've never been in this kind of situation. I don't know how to act, what to say, how to be convincing. He stood, moving around the desk to kneel before my chair, taking my hands in his. You don't have to act, Tessa. Just be yourself. That's what will be convincing. That's what will make Carmine believe you matter. Because you do. To me, you genuinely do. I looked down at our joined hands, his strong and capable, mine small and trembling. Why? I whispered. Why do I matter to you? One afternoon 6 months ago shouldn't be enough to risk everything. It's not just that afternoon, Tyler said softly. It's the woman who opened her door in a storm to help a stranger. It's the woman who plays cards with my son and makes him laugh. It's the woman who looks at me and sees Michael, not just Tyler. You remind me that there's more to life than the business, than the danger. You remind me of who I wanted to be before I became who I had to be. Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I don't know if I can do this, Tyler. Any of this. The danger, the lies, the complicated reality of your world. You don't have to decide anything now, he said, squeezing my hands gently. Just agree to tomorrow night. Help me end this threat. After that, if you want to go back to your life, I'll make sure you can. I'll make sure you're safe and set up somewhere Carmine will never find you. I promise. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that after tomorrow, I could return to my simple life, my shabby apartment, my shifts at Rosselli's. But some part of me, the part that had been lonely for so long, knew that was impossible. I'd seen too much, felt too much, connected too deeply with both Tyler and Theo to simply walk away and pretend none of this had happened. Okay, I said finally. I'll do it. For Theo. Tyler's expression softened. Thank you. He stood, pulling me to my feet. I promise you, Tessa, I will keep you safe. No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what Carmine tries, you will be protected. As I left his study and climbed the stairs back to Theo's playroom, I tried to believe Tyler's promise. Tried to convince myself that tomorrow night would end this nightmare and I could return to normal. But normal, I was beginning to understand, was already gone. The moment I'd opened my door to Tyler Valentino, normal had ceased to exist, and no amount of wishing would bring it back. The dress arrived that afternoon in a garment bag so elegant it seemed a shame to open it. Elena, a woman Tyler introduced as his assistant, delivered it to my room with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was beautiful in a severe way, her dark hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, her navy suit immaculate. Mr. Valentino thought you might need something appropriate for this evening, she said, laying the bag across my bed with careful precision. If it doesn't fit, I can have alterations made immediately. Thank you, I said, eyeing the bag warily. That's very thoughtful. Elena's expression shifted slightly, something almost like sympathy flickering across her features. A word of advice, Miss Reeves? Tomorrow night, stay close to Mr. Valentino. Don't engage with anyone unless he introduces them first. And whatever you do, don't show fear. Men like Carmine Russo feed on fear. Before I could respond, she was gone, her heels clicking efficiently down the hallway. I stared at the garment bag for a long moment before finally unzipping it, revealing a dress that took my breath away. It was midnight blue silk, simple in cut but clearly expensive, with a neckline that was elegant without being revealing. I held it up against myself, catching my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked like someone who could belong in Tyler's world, someone sophisticated and confident. It was a lie, of course. Underneath the silk would still be just Tessa, the waitress who counted pennies and wore second-hand clothes. But maybe, I thought, for one night I could pretend to be someone else. Someone brave enough to face down a man who made his living through violence and intimidation. I spent the rest of the afternoon with Theo, who was blissfully unaware of the tension that had settled over the house. We played outside on the lawn, Marco and another guard watching from a discreet distance, as Theo chased butterflies and collected interesting rocks. His innocent joy was a balm to my frayed nerves. "Miss Tessa," he asked at one point, presenting me with a smooth gray stone, "will you stay with us forever?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know, sweetheart. That's complicated. But you like being here, don't you?" His dark eyes, so much like his father's, searched my face with earnest hope. "And Papa likes having you here. I can tell." I knelt down to his level, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "I do like being here with you. You're a very special boy, Theo. But sometimes grown-up things are complicated in ways that are hard to explain." He considered this, his expression far too serious for a 6-year-old. "Papa says complicated things usually work out if you're patient and brave. Maybe you just need to be patient and brave." Out of the mouths of babes. I pulled him into a hug, fighting back unexpected tears. Maybe you're right. That evening, Tyler insisted on having an early dinner so Theo could eat with us before his bedtime. The meal was quieter than the night before, Tyler's tension evident in the set of his shoulders, the way he kept checking his phone. He caught me watching him and offered an apologetic smile. "Sorry, just coordinating security for tomorrow." "It's fine," I said, though my own anxiety was building with each passing hour. "Should I be worried?" "No," Tyler said firmly. "Everything is under control. Marco will drive us, and we'll have 4 other men positioned throughout the restaurant and surrounding area. Carmine knows better than to try anything in such a public setting." "Then why do you look worried?" I asked quietly, conscious of Theo listening from his end of the table. Tyler's eyes met mine, and in them I saw something I hadn't seen before. Real fear, carefully controlled but unmistakable. Because even the best laid plans can go wrong, and if something happens to you because of me. He trailed off, shaking his head. I couldn't forgive myself. The admission hung between us, weighted with everything unspoken. Theo, sensing the adult tension, pushed peas around his plate with exaggerated focus. After dinner, I helped Tyler put Theo to bed, the 3 of us falling into a routine that felt dangerously domestic. Theo insisted I read the story, a picture book about a brave knight who saved a kingdom from a dragon. As I read, Tyler sat on the edge of the bed, his hand resting on his son's small leg, and I felt a painful longing for something I'd never allowed myself to want. A family, a home, a place where I belonged. "Good night, Piccolo," Tyler murmured, kissing Theo's forehead after I'd finished the story. "Sweet dreams." "Good night, Papa." "Good night, Miss Tessa." Theo's eyes were already heavy with sleep. "Will you still be here when I wake up?" "I promise," I said, hoping it was a promise I could keep. In the hallway outside Theo's room, Tyler and I stood in awkward silence. The space between us felt charged with everything that had been said and left unsaid over the past few days. "You're good with him," Tyler said finally. "He's already attached to you. I can see it." "He's easy to love," I replied, then immediately regretted the word choice. Love. Such a small word for such enormous implications. Tyler's expression softened. "Tessa, about tomorrow. If at any point you want to leave, if you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, you tell me. I don't care what's happening with Carmine or the negotiation. Your safety comes first." "I understand," I said, though I wasn't sure I did. How could my safety come first when so much was riding on this meeting? When Tyler's truce with Carmine, possibly even Theo's safety, depended on convincing this dangerous man that I mattered. Tyler stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup my cheek with surprising gentleness. "I need you to understand something. What I said earlier, about you mattering to me, that wasn't manipulation or strategy. It's the truth. In a very short time, you've become important to me in ways I didn't expect and probably shouldn't allow." My breath caught in my throat. "Tyler, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "Tomorrow night, Carmine will look for weakness. He'll try to determine if you're genuinely important or if this is all an act. And the truth is, it's not an act. Not for me. Whatever happens after this is resolved, whatever you decide about your future, I want you to know that." Before I could respond, before I could process what he was saying, he leaned down and pressed his lips to mine. The kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the passionate embrace I might have expected. It was a question, not a demand, asking permission rather than taking. I found myself responding, my hands finding their way to his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath my palms. The kiss deepened slightly, his arm wrapping around my waist to pull me closer, and for a moment, nothing else existed. Not the danger, not the complicated reality of his world, not the uncertainty of tomorrow. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Tyler rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since you opened your door 3 nights ago," he admitted. "Even though you knew it was a terrible idea," I asked, my voice unsteady. "Especially because I knew it was a terrible idea." He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. "I've never been good at resisting terrible ideas." I laughed despite everything, the sound surprising us both. "Well, that's reassuring given that I'm about to walk into a meeting with a mob boss on your arm." Tyler's smile faded slightly. "You don't have to do this. I can find another way." "No," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. "I'm doing this. For Theo, for you, and maybe a little bit for myself. I'm tired of being invisible, of being someone things happen to. Tomorrow night, I choose to be someone who acts." Pride flickered in Tyler's eyes. "You're braver than you know, Tessa Reeves." "Or more foolish," I countered. "The jury's still out." We said goodnight, and I retreated to my room, my lips still tingling from his kiss, my mind racing with everything that had transpired. I lay in bed for hours, watching shadows play across the ceiling, trying to prepare myself mentally for what tomorrow would bring. Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and filled with anxious dreams. The next morning dawned gray and threatening rain. I woke early, my stomach in knots, and found Tyler already in the kitchen making coffee. He looked like he'd slept as poorly as I had, dark circles shadowing his eyes despite his otherwise immaculate appearance. "Morning," he said, handing me a mug. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," I admitted, "but ready, I think." We spent the day in careful preparation. Elena returned mid-morning with a woman named Sophia, who did my hair and makeup with professional efficiency. I watched in the mirror as I was transformed, my hair styled in elegant waves, my makeup subtle but polished, emphasizing my features without looking overdone. "You look beautiful," Tyler said when I emerged from my room that evening in the midnight blue dress. He'd changed into a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, a dark shirt underneath that made his eyes seem even more intense. "I look like I'm playing dress-up," I said, tugging nervously at the dress. "You look like you belong," Tyler corrected, offering his arm. "Ready?" "No," I wanted to say. "I'll never be ready." But instead, I nodded and took his arm, letting him guide me downstairs where Marco waited with the SUV. The drive into Manhattan was silent, tension thick in the air. Tyler held my hand, his thumb tracing absent patterns on my wrist that I suspected were meant to be soothing, but only heightened my awareness of him. The restaurant was in Midtown, an exclusive Italian establishment with a name I couldn't pronounce. As we pulled up to the valet stand, I could see several men in dark suits positioned strategically around the entrance. Tyler's security, I assumed, though they blended seamlessly with the upscale crowd. "Remember," Tyler murmured as Marco opened our door, "stay close to me. Let me do the talking. And don't be afraid to show that you care about me. That's what will make this convincing." I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. Tyler helped me from the car, his hand immediately finding the small of my back in a possessive gesture that felt both protective and genuine. Inside, the restaurant was all dark wood and dim lighting, creating an atmosphere of intimate exclusivity. A maitre d' approached immediately, his professional smile faltering slightly when he recognized Tyler. "Mr. Valentino, welcome. Your table is ready." We were led to a private section in the back, separated from the main dining area by frosted glass partitions. And there, already seated at a table with two large men flanking him, was Carmine Russo. He was older than I'd expected, perhaps 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that might have been handsome once, but was now marked by age and, I suspected, cruelty. His eyes, when they landed on me, were assessing and cold. "Tyler," he said, not standing. "So good of you to accept my invitation." His accent was thicker than Tyler's, his English deliberate. And this must be the mysterious young woman causing all this excitement. "Carmine?" Tyler's voice was controlled, polite, but I could feel the tension in his body. "This is Tessa Reeves. Tessa, Carmine Russo." I managed a small nod, not trusting my voice. Carmine's smile widened, revealing perfectly white teeth that reminded me of a shark. "Please sit." He gestured to the chairs opposite him. "Let's have a civilized dinner, shall we? No need for unpleasantness when we can break bread together like reasonable men." Tyler helped me into my chair before taking his own, positioning himself slightly between Carmine and me. The protective gesture wasn't lost on anyone at the table. A waiter appeared immediately, pouring wine that I was certain cost more than my monthly rent. I took a sip, needing something to steady my nerves, and tried not to choke on the complex flavors. "So, Miss Reeves," Carmine said, his eyes never leaving my face. "Tell me about yourself. How does a waitress from Queens end up under the protection of Tyler Valentino?" I glanced at Tyler, who gave me an almost imperceptible nod. Permission to speak, or perhaps a reminder that honesty was our best strategy. "I helped him when he needed it," I said, proud that my voice barely shook. "His son was sick and they needed shelter. I let them in." "How charitable," Carmine said, though his tone suggested he found nothing charitable about it. "And Tyler, in his gratitude, decided to move you into his home? To put you under his considerable protection? That seems like quite an overreaction to a simple kindness." "There's nothing simple about Tessa," Tyler said, his voice carrying a warmth that I knew wasn't entirely fabricated. "She's special. And yes, she's under my protection. Which should matter to you, Carmine, because it means she's off limits." Carmine's expression hardened slightly. "Everything is negotiable, Tyler. You know that." "Not this," Tyler replied flatly. Not her. The tension at the table ratcheted up several notches. Carmine's guards shifted slightly, and though I couldn't see them, I sensed Tyler's men responding in kind. We were sitting on a powder keg, and one wrong word could ignite it. Interesting, Carmine mused, sitting back in his chair. In all the years I've known you, Tyler, I've never seen you declare anything off limits. You're usually more pragmatic about these things. People change, Tyler said simply. Or they develop weaknesses, Carmine countered. He turned his attention back to me, his smile returning but not reaching his eyes. Tell me, Miss Reeves, are you a weakness? Or are you something more? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications I only partially understood. I felt Tyler tense beside me, his hand finding mine under the table and squeezing gently. I'm just someone who helped when help was needed, I said carefully. I don't know anything about Mr. Valentino's business. I'm not involved in whatever conflict exists between you. I'm just me. Just you, Carmine repeated thoughtfully. And yet, here you are, wearing a dress that costs more than you make in a month, sitting at a table with two of the most dangerous men in the city. Does that not concern you, Miss Reeves? Of course it concerns me, I admitted, deciding that honesty was indeed my best weapon. I'm terrified, actually, but I'm here because Tyler asked me to be, and because he's promised to keep me safe, and I believe him. Something flickered in Carmine's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. You believe him, even knowing what he is, what he's done? I know he's a good father, I said firmly. I know he kept his son safe when you tried to kill them both. And I know he's shown me more kindness in 3 days than most people show strangers in a lifetime. So yes, I believe him. The silence that followed my declaration was deafening. Tyler's hand tightened on mine, and I couldn't tell if it was a warning or encouragement. Finally, Carmine laughed, the sound unexpected and genuine. Well, Tyler, it seems you've found yourself a true believer. That's rare in our world. Dangerous, but rare. Which is why she remains untouched, Tyler said, his voice carrying an edge of steel. Whatever business you and I have, Carmine, Tessa is not part of it. She's not a piece on the board. She's not leverage. She's simply someone I care about, and who I will protect with everything at my disposal. Carmine studied us both for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly, as if coming to some internal decision. Very well, he said. I believe you, Tyler. I believe she matters to you, which means we have something to discuss. A truce, perhaps. Terms we can both live with. The tension bled from Tyler's shoulders, though his guard remained up. I'm listening. What followed was a carefully choreographed negotiation. Two powerful men discussing territory and tribute and arrangements I only partially understood. I sat quietly, playing my role as the woman who mattered, whose presence at Tyler's side communicated something important without words. Occasionally, Carmine would glance at me, as if checking to see if I was still there, still real. And each time, I met his gaze steadily, refusing to show the fear that churned in my gut. The meal itself was extraordinary, course after course of expertly prepared Italian cuisine. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing, focused on maintaining my composure, while Tyler and Carmine negotiated the peace. Finally, as dessert was being cleared, Carmine leaned back in his chair with a satisfied expression. I think we understand each other, Tyler. Your territory remains yours, with the agreed-upon adjustments, and in return, you stay out of the port operation I'm developing. Agreed, Tyler said, and Tessa remains off limits. No surveillance, no contact, no threats. She was never really a target, Carmine admitted. Just a curiosity. A way to understand what was important to you. Now I know. He stood, his guards immediately moving to flank him. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Tyler. Miss Reeves, it was illuminating to meet you. After Carmine left, Tyler and I sat in silence for a moment, the adrenaline slowly draining from my system. Is it over? I asked quietly. Yes, Tyler said, relief evident in his voice. It's over. You're safe now. I should have felt relieved, should have been celebrating the end of the immediate threat. Instead, I felt strangely hollow, as if something had been lost along with the danger. What happens now? I asked as Tyler helped me to my feet. He looked at me, his dark eyes searching my face. Now, you get to decide. You can go back to your life as I promised, or... He trailed off, as if afraid to finish the sentence. Or, I prompted, or you can consider staying, not because of danger or protection, but because you want to, because what's growing between us is worth exploring. My heart hammered against my ribs. Tyler, I don't know if I can live in your world. It's so different from everything I know. I'm not asking you to live in my world, he said softly. I'm asking if we can build a new one together. One where you're not just the woman I'm protecting, but the woman I'm choosing, and who's choosing me back. Before I could respond, Marco appeared at the entrance to our private area. Boss, we should move. There's press outside. Someone leaked that you were here. Tyler cursed softly in Italian, then turned to me. Ready to face the cameras? Absolutely not, I said honestly, making him smile despite the situation. Too late now. Just stay close and let me handle it. As we made our way through the restaurant and out into the cool evening air, camera flashes erupted around us. Questions were shouted from all directions, but Tyler ignored them all, his arm wrapped protectively around me as Marco and the other guards cleared a path to the SUV. I caught glimpses of headlines in the making. Tyler Valentino's mystery woman. Mob boss goes public with new romance. Who is Tessa Reeves? By morning, I knew. My face would be splashed across tabloids and social media. My privacy, such as it was, would be completely gone. Everyone in the city would know my name, my face, my connection to Tyler Valentino. As the SUV pulled away from the chaos, I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. I'd thought tonight was about ending the danger, about winning my freedom back. Instead, I realized it was just the beginning of something terrifying and exhilarating and completely unpredictable. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I wanted to run from it or toward it. The headlines were worse than I'd imagined. By the time we returned to the safe house, my phone, which I'd barely used since arriving, was exploding with notifications. Messages from old acquaintances I hadn't heard from in years, friend requests from strangers, and dozens of missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Don't read them, Tyler advised as we entered the house, his hand still at the small of my back. Nothing good ever comes from reading what people say online. But curiosity got the better of me. While Tyler checked in with his security team, I retreated to my room and pulled up the news on my phone. The photos were everywhere. Tyler and me leaving the restaurant, his arm around me, my face caught in profile looking up at him. We looked, I had to admit, like a couple. Like people who genuinely cared about each other. The articles were less kind. Gold digger. Nobody waitress. How long before Valentino gets bored? The comments were even worse. Anonymous strangers dissecting my appearance, my background, my worth as a human being. I was so absorbed in the vitriol that I didn't hear Tyler enter until he gently took the phone from my hands. I told you not to read them, he said, setting it on the dresser and sitting beside me on the bed. People are cruel when they're hiding behind screens. They're not wrong, though, I said, my voice small. I am a nobody. I am just a waitress. What business do I have being photographed on your arm? Tyler's hand cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. You are not a nobody, Tessa. You're a woman who showed kindness when you didn't have to. You're someone who plays with my son and makes him laugh. You're brave enough to sit across from Carmine Russo and not flinch. That's not nobody. That's extraordinary. Tyler. No, listen to me. His voice was firm but gentle. I know my world is harsh. I know the spotlight is unforgiving. But you handled yourself tonight with more grace than people who've been raised in this life. You were perfect. I was terrified, I admitted. So was I, Tyler confessed. Every second I sat there, I was terrified something would go wrong, that Carmine would see through us, or that one of his men would make a move, or that you'd realize just how dangerous this all was and run. I thought about it, I said honestly. Running, I mean. Especially when Carmine looked at me like I was a puzzle to solve. Tyler's thumb traced my cheekbone. But you didn't run. You stayed. You fought for this, for us, even though you barely know me. I know you better than you think, I said softly. I know you're a good father. I know you keep your promises. I know you make terrible pancakes but excellent ragu. I know you read to your son every night and that you miss your mother. I know you're trying to build something better than what you inherited. Something vulnerable flickered in Tyler's eyes. How do you see all that? Because I've been watching, I admitted. The same way you've been watching me. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. Tessa, I meant what I said at the restaurant. You have a choice now. The danger is over. Carmine won't touch you. You can go back to your apartment, your job, your life. I'll make sure you have enough money to be comfortable for a while. You'll never have to worry about rent or bills again. And if I don't want to go back? The words escaped before I could stop them. Tyler pulled back slightly, searching my face. What are you saying? I don't know, I admitted. I should want to go back. I should be counting the hours until I can return to normal. But when I think about leaving here, leaving you and Theo, it feels wrong. Like I'd be walking away from something important. You would be, Tyler said quietly. Important to me, to Theo. In 3 days, you've become part of our lives in a way I didn't think was possible. But it's only been 3 days, I protested. That's not enough time to make a life-changing decision. Then don't decide now, Tyler said. Stay a while longer. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Get to know us, this life, without the pressure of immediate danger hanging over your head. And when you're ready, you can decide. It was a reasonable suggestion. A way to buy time, to figure out if what I was feeling was real, or just adrenaline and fear, and the intoxicating pull of Tyler's world. What about my job? I asked. My apartment? I've already spoken to Roselli's, Tyler said. You're on extended leave, paid, and your apartment rent is covered for the next 6 months. If you decide to stay here, we'll deal with it then. If you decide to go back, everything will be waiting for you. You've thought of everything, I observed. I always do, Tyler replied with a slight smile. It's how I've survived this long. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Papa? Theo's voice called. Is Miss Tessa okay? Marco said there were lots of people with cameras. Tyler stood and opened the door, revealing Theo in his pajamas, his stuffed lion clutched against his chest. Miss Tessa is fine, Piccolo, just a little tired. Theo looked past his father to where I sat on the bed. Were you scared? A little, I admitted. But your papa kept me safe just like he promised. Theo's face brightened. Papa always keeps his promises. That's why he's the best papa ever. The simple declaration made my chest ache. This child, who'd lost his mother at 3, who lived in a world of guards and safe houses, still believed his father was a hero. And maybe, I thought, in the ways that mattered to a 6-year-old. Tyler was. "Want to come say goodnight properly?" Tyler asked me, and I nodded, standing and following them to Theo's room. The bedtime routine was becoming familiar. Theo picking out a story, climbing into his race car bed, Tyler and me sitting on either side while I read. Tonight's selection was about a princess who saved herself from a dragon, refusing to wait for a prince to rescue her. "I like that story," Theo said sleepily when I finished. "Miss Tessa is like the princess. She's brave and doesn't need saving." "Sometimes everyone needs a little help," I said gently. "Even brave princesses." "But you helped us first," Theo insisted, his eyes drooping. "You saved Papa and me from the storm. So you're the hero." I looked at Tyler over Theo's head and found him watching me with an expression that made my heart skip. There was gratitude there, yes, but also something deeper. Something that looked dangerously like love. After Theo fell asleep, we stood in the hallway again, the house quiet around us. "He's right, you know," Tyler said softly. "You did save us, in more ways than one." "I just opened a door," I protested weakly. "You opened a door," Tyler agreed, stepping closer, "and let light into a life that had been dark for a long time. That's not nothing, Tessa. That's everything." He kissed me then, deeper than the tentative kiss from the night before. This was a claiming, a promise, a question all wrapped into one. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and I melted into him, letting myself feel what I'd been fighting since the moment he'd walked into my life. Want. Need. The terrifying possibility of love. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tyler rested his forehead against mine. "Stay," he whispered. "Please, Tessa. Give us a chance. Give me a chance to show you that this could work." "I'm scared," I admitted. "Of your world, of getting hurt, of not being enough." "I'm scared too," Tyler said. "Terrified, actually. I haven't let anyone close since Theo's mother died. Haven't wanted to risk it. But you make me want to risk everything." "Tyler, you don't have to answer now," he interrupted gently. "Just think about it. Sleep on it. In the morning, we can talk more. But tonight, just know that I want you here. Not because you're in danger or because I need to protect you, but because when you're here, everything feels right, like pieces finally fitting together." I nodded, unable to form words past the emotion clogging my throat. Tyler kissed my forehead gently, then stepped back. "Good night, Tessa. Sweet dreams." I retreated to my room, my mind spinning with everything that had happened, everything that had been said. I changed into the silk pajamas that still felt too luxurious to be real, and climbed into bed. Sleep eluded me for hours. I stared at the ceiling, running through scenarios. What would my life look like if I stayed? Would I become some kind of permanent houseguest, awkwardly existing in Tyler's world without a real place in it? Or could I carve out a role for myself, become someone who mattered beyond being the woman Tyler was protecting? And what about Theo? I'd already grown attached to the sweet, imaginative boy. If I stayed, and things didn't work out with Tyler, leaving would hurt Theo too. Was it fair to let him get more attached when I didn't know if I could commit to this life? But then I thought about going back to my apartment, to the loneliness, the endless shifts, the life where nobody really saw me, where I was just another invisible service worker, easily replaced and quickly forgotten. Here, I was seen. Tyler saw me. Theo saw me. Even the guards nodded respectfully when I passed. For the first time in years, I felt like I mattered. Was that enough to base a life-changing decision on? The need to be seen? To matter? I must have finally dozed off because I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of voices downstairs. I checked my phone. 9 in the morning. Later than I usually slept. After showering and dressing in jeans and a soft sweater from the wardrobe that had mysteriously appeared in the closet, I made my way downstairs. The voices were coming from the kitchen, and I paused in the doorway at the scene before me. Tyler and Theo were making breakfast, flour dusting both of their faces. Theo stood on a step stool, carefully measuring ingredients into a bowl, while Tyler supervised, his large hands guiding his son's smaller ones. They were laughing, Theo's giggles infectious, as Tyler said something in Italian that made the boy dissolve into fresh laughter. "What are we making?" I asked, announcing my presence. "Nonna's biscotti," Theo announced proudly. "For you. Papa said you liked the cookies from the bakery, so we're making special ones." My heart clenched painfully. They were making cookies for me. This powerful, dangerous man and his sweet son were covered in flour, making biscotti, because I'd casually mentioned liking cookies. "That's very sweet of you both," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. Tyler looked up, and the expression on his face when he saw me nearly undid me completely. There was such open affection there, such hope, that I had to look away. "Come help," Theo insisted. "You can shape them. Papa says I'm not good at making them even." I moved into the kitchen, accepting the apron Tyler offered, and joined them in the cheerful chaos of baking. Flour got everywhere. Theo's enthusiasm exceeded his coordination, and Tyler's attempts to maintain order were undermined by his son's creative interpretations of the recipe. It was perfect. Messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. As we worked, Tyler's phone buzzed repeatedly on the counter. He ignored it at first, focused on helping Theo, but eventually glanced at the screen. His expression darkened. "I need to take this," he said, wiping his hands on a towel. "Keep an eye on the oven. 10 minutes at 3:25. He disappeared into his study, and Theo and I continued working, shaping the dough into the traditional twice-baked cookie form. Through the walls, I could hear Tyler's voice rising, sharp with anger, though the words were indistinct. "Is Papa mad?" Theo asked, his small face worried. "I think he's just handling business," I said reassuringly. "Sometimes grown-up business is frustrating. He gets mad a lot when he does business," Theo observed with the brutal honesty of childhood. "But he never gets mad at me or you, so that's okay." The simple statement revealed so much about Theo's life, about what he'd learned to accept as normal. Tyler's anger at business associates, but never at those he loved. The careful compartmentalization necessary to be both a mob boss and a father. Tyler returned as we were pulling the first batch of biscotti from the oven, his expression carefully neutral. "Everything okay?" I asked quietly while Theo was distracted arranging cookies on a cooling rack. "Fine," Tyler said, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Just some complications with the port arrangement. Nothing that affects you." But it did affect me, I realized. If I stayed, Tyler's business would always be there, lurking in the background. The phone calls that made his expression darken, the men who visited with their serious faces and hushed conversations, the world of violence and crime that bankrolled this beautiful house, and the security that surrounded it. Could I live with that? Could I accept Tyler, really accept him, knowing what he did, what he was capable of? The rest of the morning passed in a pleasant blur. We ate fresh biscotti with coffee and milk, played with Theo in the library where he'd set up an elaborate castle out of blocks, and later walked the grounds while Theo ran ahead looking for more interesting rocks. It felt, for those few hours, like a real family. Like people who belonged together, whose lives had naturally intertwined rather than collided in a storm. That afternoon, while Theo was occupied with an art project, Tyler asked me to join him in his study. The request, delivered with careful neutrality, sent my anxiety spiking. "This sounds serious," I said, as I settled into the chair across from his desk. "Not serious," Tyler said. "Just honest. I promised you time to think, and I meant it. But I also need to be honest with you about what staying would mean." I nodded, folding my hands in my lap to hide their trembling. "If you stay," Tyler began, "there are things you need to understand. My business, the family business, it's not something I can walk away from. I've spent years trying to legitimize operations, to move into legal enterprises, but there are aspects that will always exist in the gray areas. I won't lie to you about that." "I know," I said quietly. "But," Tyler continued, leaning forward, "I can promise you that I will never bring that darkness to you directly. You and Theo will remain separate from the dangerous aspects of my work. Protected, shielded. You'll never be asked to participate or even witness anything illegal." "But I'll know," I said. "I'll know what you're doing, what you're involved in. Can I live with that?" "That's the question you need to answer," Tyler said honestly. "I won't pressure you or pretend it's not complicated. It is. Being with me means accepting that I'm not a simple man with a simple life. There will always be security, always be risks, always be aspects of my existence that you won't like." I looked out the window at the grounds, at the beautiful cage that would become my life if I chose this path. "What about Theo?" I asked. "If I stay, if we try this, and it doesn't work out, he'll be hurt. He's already attached to me." "He is," Tyler agreed, "which is why I need you to be sure before you commit. Theo has lost enough. I won't let him lose someone else he cares about unless there's no other choice." The weight of that responsibility settled over me. This wasn't just about Tyler and me. It was about a 6-year-old boy who'd already experienced too much loss. "I need to think," I said finally. "Really think, not just react emotionally. Can I have until tomorrow?" "Take as long as you need," Tyler said. "Though I hope you'll stay at least through the weekend. Theo would be disappointed if you left suddenly." That evening, after Theo was in bed, I stood on the back porch overlooking the pond where Tyler had brought me that first night. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by city lights, and the air smelled of pine and earth and possibility. I heard Tyler approach before I saw him, his footsteps soft on the wooden planks. He stood beside me without speaking, respecting my need for silence. "I've never had much," I said finally, breaking the quiet. "Growing up after my parents died, it was just me and my grandmother in a tiny apartment. We had enough, barely, but never extra. Never luxury, never security. When she died, I was terrified I'd end up on the streets, that I'd lose even the little I had." Tyler remained silent, letting me talk. "I've spent 3 years living paycheck to paycheck, always one emergency away from disaster. Always alone, always invisible. And I told myself that was okay, that I was strong enough to handle it, that I didn't need anyone. But," Tyler prompted gently, "but I was lying to myself," I admitted. "I'm tired of being alone, tired of being invisible, tired of just surviving instead of living. When I'm here with you and Theo, I feel like I matter, like I'm part of something bigger than myself." "You do matter," Tyler said softly, "more than you know." I turned to face him, needing to see his expression in the moonlight. "But is that enough? Is the feeling of mattering enough to base a life on? What happens when the novelty wears off? When you realize I'm just an ordinary woman with nothing special to offer?" Tyler's hands cupped my face, his touch gentle but firm. "Tessa, listen to me. You are not ordinary. You're brave and kind and strong. You faced down Carmine Russo without flinching. You play with my son and make him laugh. You opened your door to a stranger in a storm. That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary." "You keep saying that," I whispered. But I don't feel extraordinary. I feel scared and out of my depth, and like I'm about to make either the best or worst decision of my life. Maybe it's both, Tyler suggested. Maybe the best decisions are always a little terrifying. He kissed me then, soft and sweet, a question rather than a demand. And in that kiss, I found my answer. When we broke apart, I took a deep breath. "I'll stay," I said. "Not forever, not yet. But I'll stay and see where this goes. Give us a real chance." The relief and joy that flooded Tyler's face was answer enough. He pulled me into his arms, holding me close, and I let myself melt into his embrace. "Thank you," he whispered against my hair. "Thank you for taking this chance. I promise you, Tessa, I will do everything in my power to make you happy, to make this work." "Don't make promises you can't keep," I said, but there was no heat in the words. "I always keep my promises," Tyler replied, echoing his son's earlier declaration. "Always." As we stood there under the stars, wrapped in each other's arms, I felt something shift inside me. The loneliness that had been my constant companion for so long began to recede, replaced by something warmer, more hopeful. I was taking a risk, a huge, potentially life-altering risk. Tyler's world was dangerous and complicated, and there were no guarantees that this would work out. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was choosing my life rather than just surviving it. I was choosing to be seen, to matter, to belong. I was choosing Tyler and Theo, and the possibility of something beautiful growing from the chaos of that stormy night. 3 days ago, I'd opened my door to a stranger and his son, seeking shelter from a storm. I'd had no idea that simple act of kindness would lead me here, to this moment, to this choice. But standing in Tyler's arms, thinking about Theo sleeping peacefully upstairs, I couldn't regret it. Whatever came next, whatever challenges we'd face, I'd chosen this path with open eyes. I'd chosen to stay, to see where this journey would lead, to build something new with a man who'd started as a stranger and was becoming something so much more. The storm had passed, but what it had left behind was just beginning to take shape. A new life, a new family, a new future, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was excited to see what tomorrow would bring.